Hey gamers, what's up? It's Ed Park, aka Taugrim. Wanted to talk to you today about the design issues that rogues typically face in MMOs. And this came up because in Star Wars The Old Republic, in patch 111, the opening burst sequence, the damage for the roguelike class, the Operative and Scoundrel, was significantly nerfed. They had their opener reduced by 20%, and they've had their armor penetration drop from 50 to 30%. And the effect of this is, pre-nerf, you could have Operatives and Scoundrels hitting targets really hard and burying them coming out of stealth. Post-nerf, their damage has been significantly blunted, and it's left a lot of Operative and Scoundrels in a position like, well, what am I supposed to do now? My burst capability has been significantly decreased, and I don't have some of the other tools that melees have, such as snares, charges, etc., gap closers, to the extent that other people have for their classes. So what am I supposed to do now? And we were talking about this on Vent 2 nights ago, and it revolves around this. Rogues typically do well in 1 versus 1 or small combat situations where the combat doesn't take that long, it gets resolved quickly. The rogue can use their vanish, their in-combat stealth, to gain a tactical advantage and open up with whatever CCs or damage bursters they have coming out of stealth. But that design tends to fall down when you're talking about sustained fighting at a node or large-scale fighting, realm versus realm, raid versus raid, because once a rogue has blown their in-combat stealth cooldown, which typically is a cooldown that has a few minutes tied to it, what are they supposed to do? They're not built for toe-to-toe combat, and once you've cycled through whatever defensive cooldowns and CC you have, you're kind of screwed. So this is not a unique problem to Star Wars The Old Republic. WoW rogues have this problem, Rift rogues have this problem. I saw this in Warhammer as well several years back, and it seems like no one's really skinned the cat well. So yesterday I went out to my favorite barbecue, roadside barbecue, and I'm sitting there eating some brisket and some kale and cornbread and kind of like just thinking about this problem, and I came up with what I thought was a pretty cool solution. So in my opinion, rogues should be they should have a lot of guile and deception and be able to weave in and out of combat using temporary stealth, right? And the idea is, not to tie too much in terms of the openers coming out of stealth, and not to make getting to stealth not so difficult. These are really the two issues with games right now. It's hard to get into stealth, and when I come out of stealth, there's too much tied into that, that initial jump, right? And outside of the situations, rogues aren't very effective. So what I think would be much more interesting would be to allow rogues to get into stealth in combat much more frequently, let's say every 15 to 20 seconds, and then not tie so much of their capability to their openers coming out of stealth, right? So you use stealth as a tool to break, no longer be your opponent's target, to break their line of sight so that you can move around tactically, reposition yourself, take a different angle, attack another target, maybe create a gap and get away, whatever. So that stealth is used as a tactical gameplay advantage, but not a mechanics advantage, right? And on top of this too, one thing I saw Star Wars do, The Old Republic, which I think is really elegant, is they have some temporary stealth buffs for various classes. So for example, for the dual-wielding Jedi Knight, Sentinel, and Sith Warrior Marauder classes, they have an ability called Force Camouflage, which is basically a short-term in-combat stealth. So you pop it, you're in stealth for a few seconds, and then coming out of it you can do whatever you want to do. And I think that's the right way to go. So the analogy that I came up with during lunch yesterday is like fighting as a ninja. That's what really a rogue should be like. You can get the opener out of stealth, hit your targets hard, fight them for a bit, and then baffle and confuse them. Drop your flash grenade, your smoke bomb, whatever, temporarily vanish from their sight, and then attack from a different angle. Re-engage in combat. And if this were implemented well, where getting into stealth in combat, like I said, could happen frequently. Let's say every 15 to 20 seconds you could get an in-combat stealth buff for, let's say, 4 seconds, right? And it wouldn't be too long, so that it would be an easy out for the rogue every time they want to escape and make them unkillable, but it would be sufficient to provide them with some added elements of surprise, some, getting out of their target's line of sight, and they can't be targeted, they can't be damaged, etc. And I think that this would elegantly solve the problem of making rogues not only continue to flourish in 1v1 and small-scale combat, but especially where they typically fall down, which is in the extended fighting on nodes, etc. Because in current games, once they've blown their in-combat stealth once, they're kind of boned. They don't really have much more flexibility after that. So I thought of this during lunch yesterday. Really excited. I was like, oh, this is a pretty cool design concept. I wonder what my guildies would think. So I hop on an event last night, and I start chatting up with Ryosur and Rindar, since we talk a lot of game mechanics, and I share with them my idea, and Ryosur starts laughing. And I was like, dude, why are you laughing? He's like, do you think my idea sucks? And he says, no, actually, I'm laughing because I know Rindar is smiling. I was like, and those guys have some sort of weird ESP type of thing. They're practically twins. So, Rio's like, Rindar is probably smiling, and I was like, why would Rindar be smiling? And Rindar's like, well, what you've described as a concept is basically what ArenaNet is doing with their Guild Wars 2 rogue class called a Thief. And I was like, what? So he explained to me basically that they've reached the same conclusion, which is the idea of making it hard to get into stealth, for a rogue class, and tying too much to being in stealth and getting, coming out of stealth when you attack, that those, make for a difficult situation to balance rogues for this combat over here, this larger scale sustained combat as opposed to the smaller scale stuff. So I find it ironic that what I concepted over lunch yesterday is in fact very close or similar to or the same as what ArenaNet is doing in Guild Wars 2 with their Thief Rogue class. And keep in mind, I didn't actually look at the Guild Wars 2 stuff and then regurgitate it. The only thing I've seen from Guild Wars 2 is a video on their Mesmer class, which they released, I think, back in early January or December. I can't remember. So we'll see how ArenaNet's implementation pans out. I haven't read any material of it yet. Rindar just explained to me some of the mechanics, and I said, hey, I think that's an elegant solution. And I didn't say that because I came up with basically the same thing, over lunch. It just makes a lot of sense. And in other games I've played where they've buffed or they've implemented rogues to be so strong in sustained melee combat that they don't need their stealth, then you have balance issues because then they have the added flexibility of getting into stealth and then getting away or continuing to wreck people. But this way, with temporary in-combat stealth, which is easy to get into, it'll help rogues in this department over here, which is really, this has been the area in most games where they just don't function very well. So let me know what you think of this idea. Let me know what your ideas are for making rogues work for sustainable combat or for large-scale combat. And it'll be interesting to continue the dialogue with you. Take care.
Game Breaker TV.